Hey guys, welcome to another patch making tutorial video. This time we've got the Moog Grandmother again, and we're going to be making this weird vowel vocal human sound that sounds something like this. So let's get right into it. Alright, so I've got the super basic patch initialized right here. Just the single sawtooth wave going through an open filter, simple ADSR shape, no reverb. We're just kind of starting from scratch. All right, in order to get that weird, angry vocal sound, the main secret ingredient is we're going to be audio rate modulating the cutoff frequency of the filter here. And the filter is going to be self-oscillating by cranking the resonance all the way up. So effectively, it's going to act like an oscillator, and it's going to be modulated at high frequencies, at audio rate frequencies, using another oscillator. So what that means is you're probably used to hearing the filter being modulated by a slow signal, like an LFO like this. But as you start cranking this up to faster and faster until it gets to audio rates, your ear stops hearing the distinct movement and you start to get the shift in timbre. When you apply modulation like this LFO here, you're just sweeping that cutoff frequency back and forth, which translates to different parts of the spectrum gets attenuated and then brought back up. So it's kind of a crude way of amplitude modulation. And that's effectively what happens as you crank this all the way into audio rate. That shift happens so fast that the frequency content goes up and down at audio rates, effectively giving you amplitude modulation, but not of the entire spectrum, but only at the band around the cutoff frequency and the modulation amount. All right, let's continue our patch here. So I'm going to remove the LFO contribution. So we're back here, and I'm just going to crank up the resonance to its maximum value to the point where this filter was self-oscillating, which produces a sine wave pitch at the frequency of the cutoff here. And I'm going to turn keyboard tracking off because I want the frequency of this oscillator to remain fixed. The next thing I'm going to do is the waveform that I'm going to use as my audio signal, which is oscillator 1. I'm going to bring that down to 32 foot and keep it as sawtooth wave. So I want a really bassy, rich signal going into my filter. And then what I'm going to do with oscillator 2 is I'm going to use that to modulate the cutoff frequency here. And remember, oscillator 2 is at audio rate, so we're going to get that really fast shifting of the cutoff frequency here. And the oscillator 2 mixer knob, I'm going to keep all the way down because I don't want to hear that waveform. I just want to use it to modulate. So that's going to be my modulator. Well, in this case, the filter is a carrier in a way. All right, so what we do is just patch out the raw waveform output into the cutoff frequency input here. And we get this really crazy sound. So I found that using a square wave here gives you the best results for this kind of sound. And using a frequency that is much higher than the cutoff frequency works best. So in this case, I'm going to crank this all the way up to 2 foot. And I'm also going to bring up my octave here on the keyboard. So now as I change the cutoff frequency with my hand, you can already hear those crazy vocal sounds. It just sounds like a bunch of demons arguing. All right, so now instead of using my hand here, what I can do is assign a bunch of different parameters to control the cutoff frequency as well. And that's one of the reasons I'm using this oscillator as the modulator instead of the LFO, which does go into audio rates. It's because I want to use the LFO as an actual LFO with slow rates. All right, so I'm going to set a shape that's roughly sustained in the middle and a bit of decay, just to get that initial kind of wow effect, both for the amplitude, but also for controlling the cutoff frequency here. And then we're just going to bring this amount up a little bit. And at this point, it's going to be a bunch of sweet spot finding. So you're just going to have to tweak knobs very delicately until you find the sweet spots, because obviously you can go past a certain range and completely lose that effect. So now we have two things going on, if you remember. So we have oscillator 2 at audio rate controlling the cutoff frequency, and we have the envelope generator controlling the cutoff frequency a little bit here. And the third thing we can add is the LFO to control the cutoff frequency here at a very slow rate. And again, it's all about sweet spots. If you make it too fast here, you kind of lose the effect and you get this siren effect. So you want to kind of make it slow so that the whole point is you're trying to emulate the slowness of how a human would kind of open their mouths and make vowels. So normally we don't talk like wah, 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 wah. We talk like hello. And this is basically it. So now there's a bunch of different things you can tweak. You can add some noise if you want more of a throaty sound. And then of course you can play around with the amount of envelope contribution and the shape of the envelope, so you can make it more of a pad-ish. And we can increase the release so that... And of course you can bring up some spring reverb. And you can experiment with different waveforms, but like I said, from experience, I found that the square wave as the modulator makes the most sense. Sawtooth works fine too. And of course, you can change the waveform of oscillator 1. So if you remember, oscillator 1 is the only audio source that we're hearing, other than the noise, of course. And that's just adding kind of the beef and meat to the sound. Because if I turn off oscillator 1 and the noise, you're kind of getting that vocal sound, but you're almost just shaping the kind of resonant cavity. But the oscillator is the thing that gives it the meat and gives it kind of the bones of the sound. So in this case, it makes it more of into a bass. But of course, you can pitch it up as well and create a different kind of sound. And one other cool thing you can do is maybe try using the envelope generator to also change the frequency of the modulator, which is oscillator 2 in this case. And I'm going to run that through the attenuator so that we can control that a little bit. So the shape of the envelope is changing the frequency up and down of oscillator 2, which in turn is changing the frequency of the cutoff frequency at its rate. Again, the sweet spots are really, really tiny, so you got to really be careful and don't be afraid to try different combinations of settings, because you might not notice an effect for a long range of settings. For example, the cutoff frequency here. Like in this setting here, we're not hearing any vocal sounds. And around 200 hertz is really where it starts to kick in. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that was interesting. Again, we're not trying to emulate any specific kind of sound. And obviously this is not going to replace like a speech synthesizer. And the point is not to kind of actually replicate the human voice, but just to give you a sense of that vocal-ish sound. And I thought it was a neat trick to share anyways. And it's kind of a cool tool to have in your arsenal, I think. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more tutorials and other kinds of synth stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one.